Alright guys, we're back. We just talked about the motherboard, the CPU, and the RAM, which are basically the three most important things when you're building the computer that you want to pay attention to as far as spending a little bit more money on them, making sure they're quality products, they're at the speeds you want, and that they will be kind of future-proof a little bit. So you looked at those in a basic sense, and again, we're going to look at video. Now we're going to look at video cards, which is the next most important thing to your gaming build. And again, this is going to be a broad sense. Since there's so much detail, I literally could spend about half an hour just talking about video cards. We'll just kind of do a rundown of the basics here. What you have on the table as far as brands go for video cards right now. Brands is not the right word. Architecture maybe is a little better. AMD or Nvidia. These are the two major video card producers. AMD technology or Nvidia technology. AMD cards are labeled, and this is down at the bottom. I got numbering sequence, and I'll touch on that a little bit at the end. But AMD has their 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 series. So you'll see like an AMD 7970 or a 7850 or a 7770. Those are the names of their cards. Nvidia, on the other hand, uses a shorter number with a 600 series, so HD 660, GTX 660. I'm sorry, HD is AMD. Nvidia is GTX 660, 670s, 680s, Titans, and now they're coming out with the 780s and the 700 series, and AMD will probably be releasing their 8000 series soon. So anyway, that's the way that they're made. Brand names, there is different brands of these cards. So now you have, say, Asus or MSI or XFX. Now these are companies that make these cards for both AMD and Nvidia using their chipset technologies. So you may have an Asus brand AMD 7770, or you might have an Asus brand Nvidia GTX 660 or 680. The brands, basically companies make both AMD and Nvidia cards. There are people who are on both teams. A lot of games you'll see now will have a splash screen at the beginning that say either AMD or Nvidia, basically an advertisement, and they may work with one of those two companies more closely during the development of a game, like Battlefield 4 will be coming out this next generation at the end of this year, beginning of next year, and it is actually, they're saying that they worked with AMD during their process of making the game, so that it may end up being more optimized out of the gate for AMD than Nvidia cards. There's really no wrong way to go. Either AMD or Nvidia, really comes down to your preference, but they're both quality products, so either one you're going to find. It just really is going to come down to what you want and how you feel about either one. But there's really no, a lot of people will tell you their opinions on it, but there's really no wrong way to go with either company. As far as brand names go, you want to watch especially when you're shopping around, check the reviews. Certain brands, XFX, Asus, are making more quality video cards than others. So you're going to want to pay attention to the brand name, but don't worry about the AMD or Nvidia. Either card is decent. So PCI Express times 16, 2.0 or 3.0. 3.0 is the newest one, but that is most likely when you're building your gaming rig, that's the slot on the motherboard you're going to use for your video card. So you want to make sure in your case there is room for the video card. A lot of cards coming out now are huge. The most recent one the one I have is a 660. It's long, and it's a big piece of equipment. So you want to make sure your case has the clearance as far as, once you fit it into the motherboard, is it going to run into hard drives, or are you going to be able to move drives around to compensate for the length of the video card. Clock speed, same thing kind of with processors. Your video card has the technology on it that runs at a certain clock speed. Right now, most cards are 1,000 megahertz and up. as far as clock speed goes. You'll learn a little bit more about that. But if you stick with anything in the 7000 series, 7770s or above for AMD, or 660s or 650s for NVIDIA and above are what you need for gaming nowadays, paired with a decent processor will be good. There's also things like NVIDIA has CUDA cores. There's all these different things, to video cards. Like I said, you can spend a half an hour discussing the different intricacies of each card. And what it comes down to is if you look for a certain level and above, they are fit for gaming. And like I said, AMD, the 7000 series is their newer ones, and the 600 series are NVIDIA's newer ones. And anything from those will be decent to great for gaming. The higher the number, the better. Included RAM, which is basically the memory size for your video card. Your video card has its own video memory. So right now, standard is a gigabyte and above. A gigabyte is actually becoming the old standard. What most cards out there still will have, the lower end cards will have a gigabyte of RAM. You don't want anything less than a gigabyte of RAM for your video card. Anything less than that is not really good for gaming. 2 gigabytes and above is ideal, but those are kind of getting into the more expensive cards. But games nowadays are able to eat right through that 2 gigabytes. So one is the bare minimum. You're going to want to look for something with a bare minimum. And along those lines, something that I actually don't have up there is your bitrate, bitrate transfer. A lot of times you'll see the cards will say 1 gigabyte, 128-bit transfer. 128-bit is fairly common for 1 gigabyte cards, and you don't want anything less than 128-bit for gaming. That's even low end. My 660 that I have is a 192-bit transfer, and above that is 256-bit transfer. And some of the really beastly cards that are coming out, 690s, GTX 690s, and Titans are 3 gigabytes of memory with 300 and something bit rate. So the bigger the better when it comes to video cards as far as numbers go. Just keep that in mind. Power supply connector is again, we talked about this when we were touching on power supplies. Your card most likely is going to have its own dedicated power coming off of the power supply. Any card that doesn't require a separate connector is a sign that it's probably not good for gaming. You're gonna look that you're gonna want to have a card that requires its own power. That means it's gonna obviously put out the performance that you need, just based on that one little thing. Not necessarily a hard rule, but just gives you an idea that if it doesn't have its own separate power supply connection, it's not a decent gaming card. Numbering sequence. The reason I wanted to mention this is some of the older cards for both AMD and NVIDIA are still being sold, and what you have is, like, say right now AMD is the 7000 series, 7970s are like top of the line, 7770s are lower end, still both 7000 series, but as you see, there's a 770 and the 7970. Obviously, the 7.9 makes a difference instead of the 7.7. Same thing with NVIDIA. You have 660s, you have 680s. 680s are more powerful than 660s. 650s are less powerful than 660s. That all seems pretty simple, right? But the thing you got to watch for is, say you take a step back to the last generation of NVIDIA cards and you look at the 500 series. Now, a 560 is going to be less powerful than a 660. But a 580, even though it's slightly older architecture, a 580 might be more powerful than a 660. So even though it's a 600 series compared to a 500 series, the fact that it's a 580 as opposed to a 660, the 80 outweighs the 60. There are certain features each new generation that come out onto the cards. You're better off buying the newest generation, the 600 series, or the AMD, the 7000 series, opposed to a 6000 series or an NVIDIA 500 series. The newer stuff comes with DirectX 11 support. Stuff that newer games are coming out with will be supported on the newer cards. The technology might not be there on the older cards. One of the things I also don't have up here that I should mention is your drivers. We talked about BIOS updates before. Essentially, what a BIOS update is basically a driver update. For video cards, your drivers are key. You want to make sure that your drivers are up to date. Once AMD or NVIDIA release new drivers, you want to install those. You can get them right from their websites. And this basically will add a lot of functionality and optimization for the cards. As new games come out, they will look at certain things. Prime example, Tomb Raider came out beginning of 2013, had some issues with NVIDIA cards. So if you had an NVIDIA card, you were running into issues with the game running correctly. And eventually, NVIDIA addressed that in the new set of drivers that they came out with. They put out a fix for Tomb Raider, and it essentially ran better. Once you installed those new drivers onto your computer, it helped the game run better. So drivers are basically just the way that your video card functions, with the rest of your hardware. And updates are released pretty frequently to fix mistakes or to make things run better. So just a touching on video cards. So overall lesson from this is AMD or NVIDIA, comes down to your personal preference, and go with something newer, something within your budget, but basically spend the most you can on a video card without blowing your budget. But anything in the AMD 7000 series and then the NVIDIA 600 series are decent gaming cards, but there are lower levels and there are higher levels within those. So take a look around, read some reviews, pay attention to the numbers, and higher the better. It should be mentioned that NVIDIA does have a 700, just releasing the 700 series. They're expensive though. For your first build, you're going to want to go with the AMD 7000 series or NVIDIA 600 series. Cooling. Cooling is very important with gaming, especially with gaming computers, because you want to keep your components cool. In the whole process of me making this video, besides my dog barking, you can probably hear a hum in the background, and that is because my PC sits behind my monitor, up on my bench, and I've got a total of about eight or nine fans going inside of my case. So you're gonna have that hum. And it's a soothing hum as far as I'm concerned. It's actually pretty cool. I have a lot of LED fans. My case looks cool, and it stays cool. So on here I put case fans. That's your most important as far as keeping things cool. Most likely for your, and this goes into the second thing on the list as well, most likely for your first gaming build, you're not going to go into water cooling. And what water cooling is a whole different ball game. You can either buy, water cooling systems that you kind of assemble yourself, or they have pre-made water cooling where it's just basically a small, pad that'll attach to your CPU, and then it has two tubes coming off of it and attached to a fan, pre-attached to a fan, and then the fan just gets installed into one of your fan slots on your PC, on your case. Anyway, you can buy those. Water cooling works better than air cooling, straight air cooling, but in your first build and as you are getting into gaming, affordability-wise and concept-wise, air cooling is most likely what you're going to go for. And the more fans, the better. The more options your case has for fans, the better. You're going to see aftermarket air I have written there, and aftermarket air is specifically talking about your CPU, because when you buy your CPU in the box, you're going to have a CPU fan that comes with, from Intel or from AMD. You're going to have a fan that's for that processor that will fit and is compatible. If your CPU is compatible with your motherboard, that fan's going to be compatible with your motherboard. So your options besides that fan, and especially if you're overclocking, if you want to keep your CPU a little cooler for gaming purposes, you have aftermarket coolers. Now, aftermarket coolers, if you go on Newegg and check out CPU cooling, you'll see a ton of them from Zalman, from Cooler Master. They're larger, pipe-looking, coolers that attach and stick a good 4 or 5 inches off of your motherboard, and they keep your processor a lot cooler than the stock fan that comes with it would. More important if you're overclocking. If you're not overclocking, the CPU cooler that it comes with should be more than sufficient. Case cooling options and fan size go together. We talked about water cooling, but then fan size also. Standard case fan size is 120 millimeter. some of like if you were to buy an HP or a Dell from Best Buy, a lot of the fans on that are either 80 millimeter or 90 millimeter. They're smaller fans. For those cases, basically you're getting a cheaper PC than building it yourself. 120 millimeter on the cases that you would buy off a Newegg are mostly standard. Like I said, my case, the Cooler Master 430 that I have has about 8 or 9 different slot fans. Plus my hard drives have fans. And I have one on the back, 2 on the top, 1 on the side, and 1 on the bottom. There's a lot of airflow going on in my case, so your case cooling options are, make sure your case has those options in it for the fans, and make sure you buy the right fan size for the slots on your case. But when you have your case documentation in front of you, it will tell you what size fans you need. LED or no LED. Personally, like we were talking about before, I like my case to look cool. Not just be cool, but to look cool. I like blue LEDs in mine, so I have, most of my fans are blue LED type, and it gives a nice blue glow. I have the nice clear side panel on the case, so you can see everything inside my computer, and it's all lit up nice and blue. But it just comes down to your look. My wife hates it. She doesn't, it's down in my basement workbench now, but before it was upstairs in our spare bedroom, and we have a small son, and she was worried it was going to keep him awake because of all the blue glow coming from the other room, but it didn't seem to be an issue for him. So I like the LEDs. Really comes down to your personal preference. When it comes to LEDs, you have all different colors: white, red, blue, yellow. So just however you want to build your case and whatever you think looks good. Bearing type is something to pay attention to. Sleeve bearing, ball bearing, dual ball bearing. Different ones are different quality. I have a mixture of different types of bearing in my PC, and I don't seem to really notice a sound difference or performance difference from any of them. I know dual ball bearing is and stuff like that are more longevity wise supposed to last a little bit longer, but fans are relatively cheap. So I wouldn't worry too much about that unless you have a specific preference. Just buy whatever is a decent brand name and the right price. There are fans larger than 120 millimeter, I should note. Depending on your case size, you might have 200 millimeter or above, but most cases standard is 120 millimeter. Airflow direction in my PC, like I said, I have about 8 or 9 fans in my PC, and the way I have it is on the bottom, on the side, and in the front, I have air being sucked in. On the back and the 2 fans on the top, I have air being sucked out. So I have a flow of air going from the front and inside of the computer in, and then the top and the back going out. That just keeps a steady flow going from one end to the other. So that's something to be aware of. If your case, your case may only have one front fan and one back fan, and that's fine. Just make sure that the fan in the front is sucking in and the one in the back is blowing out, and that should keep a steady flow of air going across. So again, cooling is important. It is very, very important if you're going to overclock, just because your components will get hot quick if you're overclocking. If you're not overclocking, you still do need to be aware of heat, but it's not as important. Your standard heat should be good. Always keep your computer, don't keep your computer on the floor, on carpet. Keep it where, like I said, I keep mine up on my workbench. I keep it, one, for easy access to be able to get at everything, to swap stuff out, but it's also just to keep it away from the dirt on the floor, and don't put it up against your couch. Don't tuck it into a cabinet. Don't, you know what I mean? Allow for the airflow and everything to use common sense when it comes to that. Hard drive, you're looking at a brand name. This is another spot where you don't necessarily want to skimp. Western Digital or Seagate. I highly recommend either one of those. I actually recommend Seagate a little more than Western Digital, just out of personal preference. But both are commonly sold online or at Best Buy and are decent hard drives. There are other options too, but those are the 2 main ones. First thing you want to look for is size. Size matters when it comes to hard drives. Anything from 320 gigabyte up to terabyte to 2 terabytes. Anything smaller than that. We'll get to SSDs in a minute, but anything smaller than that, you most likely will buy an SSD, which is a solid-state drive for your operating system, and you're most likely going to want to have 2 drives in your build. If you're on a budget, you can get away with 1 drive, but you want to look at speed of the drive, 3.0 or 6.0, like I was talking about earlier. SATA 3 speed is 6.0. That's just going to be the transfer between your motherboard and your hard drive. Not a real big performance difference between 3.0 and 6.0. I don't see any. And also a speed of the hard drive, you're looking at 5400 or 7200. 7200 seems to be the standard right now, but some of the older hard drives from a few years ago will be 5400. I recommend 7200 just as a standard because it is faster than the 5400. And your memory is a lot of hard drives will come kind of with their own little RAM, fast access memory in there, and you'll have anywhere you'll see 8 megabytes, 16 megabytes, 64 megabytes, all the way up to. It doesn't hurt to have that little bit of RAM on your hard drive to help speed things up. SSD are standard. SSD solid state drive. Solid state drives are smaller capacity at this point, and they're actually a lot more expensive than a standard hard drive, but they're a lot faster. And what I recommend you do if you have a little bit of money to spend is to buy a smaller SSD. Myself, I have a 128 gigabyte SSD, and I use that SSD for my Windows install. And then past that, I have another hard drive set up in there, a terabyte hard drive in there, and that terabyte hard drive is to house all my Steam games, any kind of files, and basically anything else I install on my computer goes onto that standard drive, while my Windows operating system is on my fast SSD. Makes sense? That's just recommended. If you can't do it, just buy one large, 500 gigabyte or 320 gigabyte at the least, and above all the way to 1 or 2 terabytes. Buy one 7200 RPM hard drive and install everything right onto that. You're not really going to notice too big of a performance difference. SSD, having your Windows install on an SSD is good because in games that you commonly play, like I have right now, I'm playing Assassin's Creed 3 still, trying to beat that. I have that game actually installed on my SSD because I play that more, and it helps with loading times, makes things faster, but the actual gameplay doesn't really benefit much from it, as much as just loading, getting into the game faster, and restarting Windows takes about 8 seconds. 2.3 or 3.5, it should actually say 2.5 or 3.5. 2.5 is the standard notebook size, laptop size for hard drives, and 3.5 is your standard desktop hard drive size. You can use, especially like my SSD is a 2.5, but I have it in my desktop. All I had to do was buy a $5 adapter, and it makes your 2.5 hard drive fit into a 3.5 hard drive slot. So SSDs, a lot of SSDs you're going to see are 2.5, and you'll just have to buy an adapter to make it work in a desktop. 3.5 is your standard size. That's what most other hard drives you're going to buy for your computer will handle that. Just plug and play basically. External with a question mark. External with a question mark means should you have an external drive? Only if you plan on backing up your stuff, which I highly recommend. I have an external terabyte external hard drive hooked up, and I have a program set to every night to back up my hard drives onto that external. So all my information is both on my external and on my internal drives. If anything were to happen to either, I have a backup. Is this necessary for your first build? Excuse me, your first gaming build? No, not at all. It's just something to look at in the future as far as to help back up your game saves. Nothing is worse than having to reformat unexpectedly, or something happening to your information, corruption, and losing a game save. Quick story, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Got it in my head that I was going to 100% that game. I was going to do everything available in that game and get 100%, and it became a life goal of mine, and I unexpectedly had to reformat my hard drive and lost my Brotherhood save. It does not cloud save, so I was not happy about that. So after that is when I decided to make sure that everything was getting backed up to my external drive, and I would never have to go through that pain again. Cooling for your hard drives, not necessary at all, but like I said, I have a 2.5 laptop size hard drive in my desktop, and when I did that, I did have to buy a holder for it, and that holder came with a fan attached to it, so it didn't hurt just to buy one with the adapter with a fan. So not necessary, but it's something to consider just to keep the airflow onto your hard drives and keep them cool. CD DVD drive is fairly simple. Like I said, a lot of times now you're going to be doing digital download with your games. You might not even actually buy a physical game. You'll just pay for it and then download it to your drive. But in the case that you need a DVD drive, they're absolutely available for around 15 bucks on Newegg. Very cheap. For burners even, $15. Brand name doesn't really matter, to tell you the truth. They are so cheap, and you're only going to be using it so much that the brand name's really not a big deal. So this is something you can kind of get for around 15 bucks on Newegg, regardless of brand. Just be aware if you buy a cheaper brand, they might be a little noisier. Other than that, you're not really going to notice any difference between brand names. DVD or Blu-ray depends. For your first build, I would say stick with DVD. You don't really need a Blu-ray player in there unless you really are set on it. For about 40 to 60 bucks on sale, you can find Blu-ray drives on Newegg. So that just comes down to personal preference and what your budget is. But I would just recommend at least getting a $15 DVD drive. Reader or burner, same thing. Just comes down to personal preference. A reader is obviously just going to read what you put in there. Burner is going to allow you to burn DVDs. With USB drives, thumb drives, chances you're going to be burning any kind of DVD or anything is slim to none. I can't remember the last time I burned a DVD or a CD. Drive speed, something to look at, 24 times, yada, yada, yada. It's pretty much standard now. The ones that you pay 15 bucks for on Newegg are going to be 24 times or 16 times. And like I said, for what you're doing, you're not going to notice any kind of difference with the speed. Unless you're burning movies or burning Blu-rays or burning whatever on a regular basis, then you're really going to want to pay attention to those speeds. Otherwise, just for your gaming rig, not really a big deal. Peripherals. This is where your gaming rig, besides your tower, the things you're going to need to flesh out your gaming rig. A monitor. Obviously, you're going to need something to view the games that you are playing on. Monitors anywhere, widescreen monitors anywhere from 20-inch up to 27, 28-inch now. For your first build, you're going to want to go from around 20-inch to 23-inch, 24-inch at most maybe. 720p on 20-inch monitors, 1920, 22-inch monitors may have 720p still. Anything 23-inch, 22-inch and above can be 1080p, and 1080p is just the quality. It's how many pixels per inch or something like that. 1080p is clearer. It's more HD. I play myself on a 20-inch 720p monitor. Eventually I will upgrade, but for now that's just what I have. So, and I don't really want to change it at this point money-wise. So, 720p for 20-inch, 22-inch, and 22-inch and above, you have 1080p, high definition, but they're both widescreen, high-definition monitors. Just 1080p is going to be a little bit clearer. For your first build, like I said, 20 to 23-inch, for around $100, $125 range is what you're looking at. Keyboard and mouse for your first build, I would recommend just get a wireless, a $30 wireless set, Microsoft wireless set. A lot of people will stone me for saying that. Oh man, wireless for gaming. I used a wireless mouse and keyboard for the longest time for gaming, and I had absolutely no issues with it. No responsive issues, no cutting out, no nothing. So, you take your chances. A lot of people will say keyboard and mouse, you definitely want to have wired. So, even if you pick up a cheap wired and a cheap wired keyboard and cheap wired mouse, you may be better off than the wireless. But, $30 wireless keyboard and mouse is always a good option, or just a cheap mouse and cheap keyboard wired. Don't go crazy with gaming mouses and mice and keyboards. You don't need them right away. I myself have picked up a gaming mouse and a gaming keyboard along the way as I found them on sale. But in the beginning, you don't need anything crazy. Gamepad, wired 360 controller. If you plan on making your PC your main gaming system, you're most likely going to want a controller as well as the keyboard and mouse. Some games are just better with a controller. And being that PCs are mostly Microsoft Windows ran, your wired Xbox 360 controller is your best option. You can also go wireless, but the wired ones are cheap and reliable. So myself, I use an aftermarket Airflow Xbox controller, and that is a must if you plan on doing all your gaming on the PC. and most games will recognize the 360 controller. If you already have it plugged in and you start up the game for the first time, it'll know that you have a controller, 360 controller plugged in, and it'll automatically, map your controls to that. You can then go in and change that if you want. But a definitely recommended thing for 25-30 bucks. Headset, any headset will do. Any headset with a microphone will do. You're going to want to have this, again, just for being able to communicate with people if you play online games. For myself, it was because of having a young son. The noise-wise, it's easier for me to throw on a pair of headphones and crank that up than it is to have, sound blaring out of my speaker system. But Turtle Beach is the cream of the crop as far as I'm concerned, as far as headphones go, and some of their lower-end headsets are relatively cheap. I got a pair of X12s that are made for Xbox, but they also work for the PC. I got a pair of X12s, Toys R Us on sale for $30. They're normally $60. So if you keep your eye out, you can score a decent pair of Turtle Beach headsets for cheap. And comfort-wise, you can wear them for hours. They're probably, I recommend it to everybody, and I'm really, I speak their praises a lot because it's one of the most common sense and best purchases I've made gaming-wise, because it just, enhances the... I play with the headset on even if I don't need to, just because it enhances the experience at this point. Thumb drives, just threw this up there anyway. Like I said, a lot of stuff you're going to be doing game-wise is just digital anyway, but if you need to transfer information, if you need to transfer game saves, it's good to have a quick way to do that. If you need to bring patches, if you can't download a patch for whatever reason, if you need to move files, having a small thumb drive, 4 gigabyte, 8 gigabyte, 16 gigabyte, having some kind of a quick way to move files around is good to have, and they're relatively cheap. USB expansion. This is something I ran into recently. The more you do with your PC, the more you're going to run out of USB slots. I needed to buy a 4-port expander just to be able to have my headset, my external drive, my printer, my controller, my mouse, my keyboard, everything plugged into USB ports. Your case is most likely only going to have so many USB slots. So eventually you might need to buy an expansion, a USB expansion, whether it's external or internal, to allow you to run all your stuff at the same time. So that's it. Basically, not an exhaustive classroom tutorial here as far as what you need to know. Obviously, could go into depth about a lot of this stuff way more than I did, but I hope it at least gave you enough information to kind of get the knowledge you need overall to decide if getting into PC gaming is something that you'd be willing to invest in, and a little more information on the basics of what you should invest in. Obviously, there's a lot of resources online that'll give you a lot more information, but this is somewhere just to start. Good luck. If you do find that PC gaming is your thing, I like to compare it to tattoos or those other addictive things that once you get into it and you just want more and more. Be careful on Newegg. It's easy to get out of hand. That's why budget is the first thing we talk about in this classroom. Is make sure you stay on budget. Set yourself a limit. If not, you're going to find yourself buying parts all the time and upgrading things that don't necessarily need to